At a time when so many of us feel like our connections with people are distant and conversations surface level, really engaging with each other takes intention. I'm Ashley Gould, the founder of Attend, an everyday luxury home brand with products that set the table for meaningful spaces and gatherings. Our podcast builds on those spaces through dynamic discussions with open-hearted people, with the goal of sparking conversation around your table. In this series, we explore how designed spaces impact our lived experience and day-to-day life. Our aim is to help you understand what makes a space fulfilling and provide a scientific framework along with expert insights to help you create spaces that enhance your well-being. We delve into the entire spectrum of designed spaces, from our brain's relationship with aesthetics to finding the right designers, lighting systems, and objects that support your well-being. Ultimately, we examine how the spaces we inhabit can enrich our ability to be present and connect with others. Join us.
Welcome to episode 10 of the From Brain to Home series. Our guest in this episode is Verda Alexander, a Nicaragua-born, San Francisco-based designer, artist, and climate activist. She co-founded Studio O&A, a design firm renowned for creating innovative workspaces for leading technology companies such as Facebook, Microsoft, and Slack. Alexander's educational background includes a Bachelor of Arts from San Jose State University and advanced studies in landscape architecture at Harvard Graduate School of Design and the University of California, Berkeley. Alexander is an editor-at-large at Metropolis magazine, where she expands conversations around design, climate activism, social justice, and art. Her contributions to the field have been recognized with accolades such as Designer of the Year by Contract Magazine and induction into the Interior Design Magazine Hall of Fame. Alexander also engages audiences through Break Some Dishes, a podcast addressing design's role in climate change. Her multifaceted career reflects a dedication to leveraging design for positive environmental and social impact. Enjoy.
Verda, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm excited as well.
I always like to start hearing a little bit about where you grew up and what kind of kid you were.
Oh boy, going way back. Yeah, so I grew up in so many different places. I lived in 13 different places before I was 13 years old. I was born in Central America, in Nicaragua, and lived in Ohio, Nevada, back to Honduras when I was 7 or 8, Texas, and then way up in Northern California by the Oregon border. And me, my brother, and sister, we forced my dad to stay in the Bay Area through our middle school and high school years. And it was great to be near an urban hub, kind of at that stage in our lives. But it definitely made me a little bit of a shy kid. It was hard to make friends every couple of years and move. And I think one of my favorite things to do as a kid was to explore all these different neighborhoods. I remember in Honduras, there was this vast vacant lot, but it was like 5 acres, and there was all kinds of weird, creepy things in it. And I just remember loving just exploring this vacant lot next to my home. There was a creek in my town up in Northern California, and I just loved going up and down the creek. And sometimes I'd have a friend or two with me, but I think it was because I was kind of a little bit of a loner kid, that I just loved doing this type of stuff on my own and making up stories about exploration and all of that as I traversed all these different landscapes. It's really informed my life. I love weeds in a vacant lot, and I can make up so many stories about the weeds and the junk in a vacant lot. And I love that.
Well, I'd like to ask this question because it's so often the case that a guest's childhood has influenced their professional decisions in life. Do you feel like that's true for you? I mean, certainly like the curiosity and the wandering, and we'll obviously get very into your career and your expertise, but it does feel like there's a synchronicity.
It took me some time to kind of figure it out. My family, we were kind of a very frugal household. My dad was very much into recycling. I was on the ecology club in middle school, which is a quick way to become very uncool very fast. So I kind of rebelled against that whole environmentalist side of me. But what didn't in some ways was the aesthetic of it, like these inspiring landscapes or environments. One of my favorite environments as a teenager was this art museum in Berkeley. It didn't work very well as a museum. It was all these slabs of concrete and ramps and things like that. But I just loved this place. I didn't realize at the time that I was really resonating with this idea that our environment can really elevate us as humans. And that includes like street trees. I'm huge into street trees and kind of that urban environment.
So then tell us how you came into your career in art and design.
Yeah, it was a bit of a convoluted path. I discovered an art class in my senior year of high school and found one of my superpowers, which is I can recreate anything creatively and do a pretty good job at it. Like whether it's with ink or pen or paint or cardboard or paper mache or whatever. I went down this path thinking that I wanted to be an artist, and this opened up this whole creative world for me. I was at a turning point after I got my art degree, my undergraduate degree, and I decided I wanted to be a little more practical, so I tried to get into landscape architecture. And for many reasons, I did get my degree in landscape architecture, but just found it not as fulfilling as I wanted, or maybe not as creative. I was really interested in making art and doing public art and being more creative. And I got this opportunity to start my own business, but it was in interior design, which I'm like, okay, I don't know a whole lot about interior design, but it's related. You've got architecture, landscape architecture, interior design. Those are the professions of the built environment. I'm like, I can do this. And the idea of being an entrepreneur really inspired me. And it was an exciting journey that I was on for about 30 years.
Yeah. So tell us about that. You co-founded Studio O+A. Tell us about the founding and how that came about, and then a little bit about your journey. I mean, I've looked at a number of the workplaces that you've designed, and they're really inspiring. And then we'll get to another shift in your career where you sort of want to go in a different direction.
Yeah, I'm going to try to do the short version because it spans quite a long period of time. But I have to say my partner was... So we were high school sweethearts, and we went to the same college, San Jose State, together. He discovered interior design because it was in the art building where I was studying art. My roommate gave him an internship, which he turned into a career for a while I was in grad school. And he was the one that kind of decided, I want to leave this firm and I want to start my own firm, and let's do it together. And so that was kind of what got us going. What convinced me to do this was I was really thinking about the environments that we're in and how they can make us better at what we do or inspire us or not. And I'm thinking the workplace is where we spend most of our waking hours. So let me see what I can do in the space of workplace. And back then, in the early 90s, there was a lot of cubicles, a lot of gray, mousy cubicles that were kind of in the dark parts of the building, and the CEOs were out in the beautiful windowed corner offices and things like that. And we decided we were going to start a workplace revolution and change things up. And that's what really kept me going and really inspired me for all these years.
So tell our listeners a little bit, like maybe pick one of your favorite workplace makeovers that you did. What's on your website is like open spaces, a lot of color, playfulness, as well as a focus on creating the right space for, a lot of like thinking and other kinds of work. Maybe you can share like a favorite workspace.
Yeah, I have so many favorites, but maybe I'll talk about one of my favorites that really also put us on the map. It was in 2008, 2009. It was Facebook's first headquarters. And this is before the headquarters that they're in now. This is when they were quite small. They were under 700 people, and they had buildings sprinkled throughout downtown Palo Alto. They were really excited to have a permanent space. This was when Facebook was cool. I boycott Facebook now, but I didn't even know what Facebook was when they became our client. I had to get on it quick and figure that all out. So we used their platform to poll everyone in the firm. So it was our first opportunity to put into practice what we've been wanting to do, which was to democratize the office, to really flatten the hierarchy. And so we listened to everyone and really created this unique office where it was built around this idea of neighborhoods and connecting neighborhoods through these thoroughfares. And also this idea of people, like almost like the worker is the designer and putting the final touches on their space. So almost like creating this blank slate or tabula rasa for the employees to really make the space their own. And I thought that was just kind of brilliant, and it worked so well as a space. And it was gritty and grungy, but it had these really great moments of inspiration, and it functioned really well, and it led to a lot of opportunities for the employees to come together, just like exactly what you would expect a young tech firm back in the early 2000s to want for innovation and creativity.
And at that time, did you incorporate spaces for ping pong and eating and those kinds of things?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was, yes. Yeah, we'd been working for tech firms for about a decade before that project, easily, probably longer. And a lot of these, they'd always want a ping pong table somewhere or a rock band room. I think that's where we first did that was the old video game that was popular way back in the day. Micro kitchens where people could come together and get snacks. That was a big thing. Kind of recreating almost like the gamer engineer space, right? Where they're comfortable, like a dark cave. Like I remember this space that we designed where we put in lava lamps, made things really dark. And that was just kind of what they liked.
Yeah. So 30 years of doing mostly workspaces, or was it also commercial spaces?
Well, they're the same. Corporate workplace.
So not retail.
Not retail, not hospitality, a tiny bit of residential, but mostly for our existing clients.
Okay. And so that sounds like it was very collaborative with the workers. Was that a consistent experience, or did it really depend on the client?
It always completely depended on the client. We would push for that, and oftentimes we would get some level of collaboration. I think that was probably one of the most collaborative projects that we've ever done, but it really just would depend on the client and the leadership within the team that we were working with, the client team.
And did you ever, I'm sure in the beginning you were excited to just get the business, but as you progressed, did you create guidelines for yourselves on which clients you wanted to work with and why, in terms of either their view of sort of the hierarchy of the corporate world or the way they treated their employees or things like that?
That was always a goal, but it's hard to get your perfect client land in your lap, and you kind of just have to work with what you get. But we did love, for the most part, working with tech clients because they understood the connection between your environment and better collaboration, creativity, innovation. Like they really understood that connection. It was also an environment of innovate or die, right? So it's just a constant change for change's sake. And I think at some point that can go too far.
Okay. So, and let's talk about that, because at some point, and I think, although you can correct me that it was around COVID, perhaps, that you started to question the impact that you were having in creating these workspaces where, and I think this also evolved over time, where these workspaces, and I worked in a number of them, evolved to become like you literally never need to leave. Like in one workplace, we had somebody come in and do CrossFit and yoga, and lunch was brought in. It was sort of like you just never had to leave the premises. And obviously, I think particularly in tech, there was an emphasis on long work hours, so staying in the office for long periods of time. So tell us a little bit about that.
That started, I think, innocently enough, right? I think one of the things that we remember was an emphasis on cafeterias that could provide food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then late night snacks and nap rooms, right? And that's when, you're starting to think, okay, well, they really want people here around the clock. And at first we were like, okay, cool, we're going to go with this, the 24/7 office. There was all these buzzwords and jargon around that. And, meditation rooms, yoga rooms, showers, gyms, like anything anybody would want. I started to question that at some point. I believe it was probably around the Facebook time or a little bit after, so maybe to 2010, where I was thinking, all of these amenities, I called them pleasure assets, just these things that would keep you at the office. And I'm like, well, if we're just at the office all the time, when do we go home? When do we get to truly recharge and relax in our own environments? And what is that taking away from us? And who are we serving ultimately? Is it really just the pocketbooks of the CEOs and their corporations? And that's what really got me thinking that maybe designing all of these elements to make things easier, but also to distract you, in some ways was good, right? You could have a little recharge break, go play a video game in the music room, and then come back out and get back to work. But I was thinking, what if we just didn't have all those rooms and you just got your work done, and then you could go home in 6 hours instead of 12 hours and have more time with your kids and your dog and things that really matter. And I pushed that idea as far as I could, at least wrote an article about it. But it's hard to push that with the client because the client they have their own agenda, right? And I think interior design as a profession really does focus on solving the problems specifically for the client. And a lot of times we don't look beyond.
Yeah. And I think just based on my experience, and I was in legal and HR and operations and, like sort of that part of the business. And you're also listening to what employees are asking for, right? And there became an expectation, which I do think shifted during COVID and things kind of ratcheted back down a bit, although I have been out of the tech world for a while, so I'm not quite sure where things stand right now. But there was this expectation, like if the company doesn't offer you all of these meals and they don't have, the meditation room, and then it's harder to hire. So I think it became a little bit of like this hamster wheel where you kind of had to keep up with what other companies were doing to try to attract the best talent. And I think that also became kind of a little bit of a trap,
Absolutely. For better, for worse, it became a standard, an expectation, especially of that generation of employee. Like, we want all these amenities. And it was a huge recruitment tool for companies, for better, for worse.
So I didn't realize that this actually started, like your thought process about it started well before COVID, actually. So you still, though, were doing these spaces as you were kind of working through this. But eventually, even though you're still doing work with your design studio, you're also doing other work. So tell us about that shift, how you came to it, and how you made that decision.
To shift into other work? Yeah. So I started to question what I was doing with these tech clients well over a decade before COVID. And just to touch on COVID a little bit, I think the issue with COVID and return to work now is a little bit different than just providing all these amenities. It's really trying to figure out what is going to bring people back to the office. And I think people are thinking more deeply about what is important to do in the office. Is it to have face-to-face conversations or to have brainstorm sessions in a room together? Is it to have meetings together? Is it to get hard work done without distraction? Like, people are thinking a little more fundamentally about work now, I think, since COVID. But I guess it was a couple of years before COVID where I decided that I wanted to see if I could reach not just the corporate elite, but just the average Joe or a community that needed something. And so I embarked on this. I had done a few creative projects just on the side, trying to fuel my artistic side. And this was probably the biggest one that we embarked on. I decided to do that. We needed to go out into the community. And therefore, we had to buy a food truck. We had to buy this food truck that we were going to convert into a mobile design lab. We were going to connect with nonprofits or architects or individuals in communities, find issues that we could address and help these communities, but do it in a way where we're not the big San Francisco design firm coming in telling them what to do, but really trying to do this collaborative process where we engage, where we have a bunch of community meetings and we meet with people. It was like an intense process. Just retrofitting a food truck into a mobile design lab was number one. The second thing was all of my designers going, we're not urban planners. We're not landscape architects. We don't know what we're doing we're not community planners. We don't know what we're doing. But that was kind of the whole point, was taking everybody outside of their comfort zone, really pushing the envelope, seeing what we could do and how we can engage with these communities. And it was just kind of just one of the most, like, for my career, my 30-year career, just one of the most memorable things that I have done and most impactful, personally exciting that I've done from all of those perspectives, from taking my team and really pushing all of us to think differently about design, to engaging with some really incredible people up and down California. We were going to take it, we had all these plans to take it on this crazy road trip all the way across country, but it didn't have very good air conditioning or heating. It was a very loud truck. If you started going over 60 miles an hour, it started to rattle like it was about to fall apart. So the furthest we went was down to Los Angeles and back.
So are you still doing that?
No, we did it for about a year. We planned about 7 or 8 trips up and down California. And I wanted to do it all as one big, like, start in September and finish in January or something. But we kind of did one trip and then took a break and then planned the next trip. There's a lot of planning involved in between the trips. And then we would do another trip a few months later. And so it took us about a year. And then at the end of that year, we'd always planned to write a book about it. We'd teamed up with a publisher who was interested in chronicling this journey. So it was kind of this book about the design process and about the journey.
So is the book published?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon. It's called the Food for Thought Truck book.
Okay. And can you tell us, you said you had a lot of beautiful experiences. Can you share one of them?
When do you spend the most time with the people you love? For us, it's at home, around the dinner table with family, or sipping cocktails in the living room with friends. So why not make that time even more meaningful by imbuing your gatherings with pieces that not only make connecting easier, but spark conversation around your table? Amaton's collection of small batch, artisan, quality-made pieces for tabletop and home are not only made for simple serving, they're works of art designed for daily use. Whether you're hosting a dinner party or sitting down for family game night, our collections create a sense of presence and peace in every home. Shop our collection of dinnerware, drinkware, serveware, and more at amatond.com. That's AMEATENDRE.com. Gather by design.
Yeah, I think my favorite stop was Bakersfield. For one, they put us up in this old Frank Lloyd Wright home that was super, super creepy. Like, it's almost like I couldn't sleep there. It felt like the vampire house or something like that. And somebody on my team started thinking there was like a ghost there, and it was kind of crazy. But Bakersfield is this little rural farm community that I hadn't really spent a whole lot of time in, but like a lot of these communities, it had a really cool little maker culture. And our hub was this coffee shop that kind of attracted all the creatives. And we were parked in the parking lot outside of the cafe. We stenciled the asphalt parking lot with these patterns and then created this outdoor furniture. It's like street furniture. It was one of the projects where we actually created an environment, even though it was for an exterior outdoor environment. We still created a space. We were pretty excited about that. And we had so much interaction with the community. We were basically creating, our main reason to be there was to do a kind of a creative visioning around what their blighted community. There's a 3-block area where they wanted to revitalize. And so we did some creative visioning with the community about what the possibilities could be. And we had a Pechakucha. I mean, we just so much interaction with the community. It was just amazing. And I just have so many great memories of people there.
And that was years ago. Do you know if that outdoor space continues to exist?
That's a good question. I don't. I know that the coffee shop is still there, but I don't know if our graffitied parking lot is still there, if our furniture is still there. I should check one of these days.
Well, it sounds like it was quite a journey. So did that then take you like more into a shift of what you're doing now? And on your website, it says that in 2023, you started a practice aiming to chronicle individuals, agencies, labs, collectives, and research teams in design working outside of traditional modes.
Yeah, I think that project really coalesced my art interest of something called social practice, where your art can be any medium, but the point is that you're engaging with the community. And I kind of saw that food truck as an art project as much as a design project. And I really wanted to explore that. And the alternative practice project came about, I had a partner, and we were talking about mainstream architecture and design and how it can be really challenging. You asked earlier about finding that client that is aligned and that can be a true collaborator, and how hard or next to impossible it is, especially when as a firm you're looking at the bottom line and payroll and so many other things. And we talked about these practices that have really just gone against the grain and chosen to not go with what's expected. Like, I'm going to go work at a firm and I'm going to take these steps to become an architect or a designer or a leader in these firms, but just I'm going to go do my own thing. And we found just this wealth of small practices, a lot of them minority owned or led, women led, sometimes a duo, maybe a 2-person duo, doing some just incredible things in the community and doing them in a way where they could look beyond what the client needs were and incorporate the entire community or the entire ecosystem, like really think about all of the pieces that need to come together for a design to work well, not just for the person or the company that the design is for, but for the entire community or the entire planet.
So are you doing that still? That's still a part of your practice?
I'm consulting with them. It was hard because we were raising grant money to do it. And I got about 15 interviews done, and it culminated with this lovely residency in Italy, in Tuscany, where we distilled the interviews down to something that we could publish. And we realized during that month-long retreat that we needed more money for a website and to continue the research, and that we really could hire researchers, maybe college students, to do some of these interviews for us. And my partner decided, she was a much more of a grant writer than me, and decided that she would take that on and see how far she could take it. I'm actually going to do another interview here locally with a group, with a young product design duo. But for the most part, I am not involved in the project, but I'm tracking it closely.
Okay. And is that published work also available?
It's all right now online.
Okay, we can put it in the show notes. I think this is so interesting. You discuss, and it's, I think, evident in a lot of your work, the importance of friction. So introducing small challenges to encourage creative thinking in design. Can you talk about what that means pragmatically? So for people who can't kind of visualize what that means.
You have these eras of your life, right? And this was one of my eras where I was deeply questioning workplace design. And now I've expanded kind of what I'm doing into so many different areas that workplace is just one small piece of that. And so I had to go back and think about what I meant by all of that. And I do think it started with just, I think, digital distraction. Just how do we manage that? And also thinking about these places that we created that were just so comfortable that maybe they don't really help us get our work done. Like I was saying, what got me into the field of workplace was like thinking about deeply what makes a ideal workplace. It gives us the best opportunities to be not just productive, but inspired, and really pushes us to get the best out of us. And I think about that a lot because I have this side art practice that flounders. It goes from maybe getting a little bit of legs to floundering again. And it's, I always put it last as my priority. So it never ends. I never quite get to it, but I keep trying. And I was thinking about this retreat that we went on in Tuscany, even though it was in a beautiful place. It wasn't like the most ideal setup, of course. The place was free, but we had to provide our own food and just take care of a lot of things on our own. But it did give us that space to work. But there was some friction there. We had to make some effort to make it work. As humans, we will slide towards ease, I think, right? And I think that that's what our digital distraction gives us. Like, it gives us this ability to kind of escape the real hard work and gives us our serotonin boost or whatever it is, so we can feel good, but it really isn't getting us to anything meaningful. And that's kind of where it started. I did some research. I found this book called Deep Work by Cal Newport, where he talks a lot about the importance of finding a way to get to a place where you're actually truly focused on doing hard work. In the research that I found, there's this Yerkes-Dodson law that talks about how there's a relationship between arousal or stimulation and performance. So we need some amount of physiological or mental arousal in order to kind of stimulate us to get something done. And too much but it's a fine balance. You can have too much, okay, and then you're not going to get anything done. So that's the challenge, right?
This is so fascinating. Okay, so in your research, you found that the ideal amount of friction is optimal for human performance, essentially.
Yeah.
What did you do from a design perspective to introduce that friction?
Yeah, I tried to find examples, and it's really funny. Have you heard of John Muir? Anybody heard of John Muir? Yeah, he was the very famous naturalist that cataloged our national parks here, Yosemite, and did those beautiful photographs and stuff like that. He was also a designer, but he invented his bed. Somehow it was attached to an alarm, and the bed would literally, like, when the alarm went off, one of the legs would fall off the bed, and it would kind of flop up and throw him out of bed. So that was my example of friction. Putting that into practice, you can see the obvious pushback from a client not wanting to introduce a whole lot of friction into their designs. But I mentioned earlier that I had some opportunity to do some more artistic creative projects. And one of them was a project where I created a temporary co-working space in South Carolina in an empty retail space. We were offered this space for a month. And I wanted to experiment with how people might personalize their space, kind of extending my theories and my thinking about the Facebook project a little bit. But I also inadvertently created this space that required friction because you had to build your space before you could work in it. And I provided a kit of parts that people could use to build their tables and chairs and desks. We did a GoPro and documented all the tenants. This South Charleston also had this incredible maker culture community, and we had a whole host of, like, from urban planners to ceramic artists to a taxidermist. They all utilized the space. I should have done an exit survey of them, but I don't know if it made them more creative or made them more prolific, but it was really interesting to see how these people not only personalized their space, but worked to get it to what they needed.
Well, I think it's a super interesting concept, and maybe it's more challenging to introduce or incorporate in a more traditional workspace, but it seems like a great tenet for life. I mean, I think generally speaking, discomfort leads to growth. So, and I can see this idea of like, but just the right amount of discomfort, like not too much, or it could be overwhelming, you know? So I think for me, it's such a fascinating idea. I don't know how you would incorporate it into more traditional workspace, even though tech workspaces are not necessarily traditional. But
do you have another example?
Great.
Of one that was actually mentioned in that deep work book as well. It was an architecture professor who created a space, an office, a workplace. We called it the eudaimonia machine. And eudaimonia comes from the Greek word for happiness. And so the idea is that you would progress from a linear journey from distraction to focus. It starts with a gallery space, and that gives you inspiration. Then you move into what's called the salon, and that gives you collaboration. That's where you can collaborate. Then you move from collaboration into investigation in the library. And then you do, this space is called the office space. And it's where you do your superficial work. That's what he called it. And then you finally ultimately go to something called the chambers, which is hyper private spaces, almost like cubicles or phone booths, where you can ultimately do your deep work. But the idea is that you have to go through this journey. You can't just go straight into deep work.
That's so interesting.
I would love for a client to want to do something like this.
I mean, it sounds so fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone listening wants to do it, you know how to find Verda.
Absolutely.
So when was this theory or this concept created? Do you know? Like, how old is it?
Oh, shoot. I don't know. I don't think it's that old.
We'll look it up.
Yeah, we'll have to look it up.
It's fascinating. And do you think about this concept of friction in other spaces? So workspace, but what about your home or when you go to a doctor's office or other places? What have you thought about that?
Well, I think the reason for friction in a workplace is that you're trying to be productive. You're trying to create meaning through production. And I think a home has a different purpose. A home is more for comfort, relaxation, to recharge. Of course, now, since the pandemic, a lot of people do work from home. I'm working from home now. So I think there are spaces in the home that could have more friction. Again, a doctor's office is about care and getting care. And I'm watching that TV show, The Pit, like just like everybody else. I don't know if you're watching that show.
I'm not, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, everybody waits in the waiting room, the emergency waiting room, for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. I would argue that there's way too much friction in doctors' offices and hospitals.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And it does resonate with me that there are parts of your home where you want friction and then parts where you don't want friction. So I think that makes a lot of sense too. But I also wonder if there's a way to sort of morph this concept into like mental friction. So, you know, there's a lot of research that shows people, let's say you have a list of 10 things you want to get done in a day. Mostly people will do the easy things first, which is not actually the way you should do it because you actually need some friction. So I wonder if there's a way to introduce some mental friction, and maybe it's just like your own rules for how you greet the day or greet the work that you need to get done in a day. But I think that it's a really interesting concept beyond the workspace.
I tackle the easy things first. And I know what I'm doing, and I know why I'm doing it, and I can't seem to change my pattern or my routine.
Yeah, it's a hard one. Maybe it's just like you say on Mondays, I'm going to tackle a hard one first. And you just start like really small and see if you could just, okay, I only have to do this one day a week. I can do it.
Yeah. I think that might be like giving yourself the time and saying, I don't need to do all of it. I don't need to do a lot of it. I can just do one small piece of this tough project.
Because, I mean, the truth is if we never tackle the tough projects, we'll never fully progress to where we want to get.
Absolutely.
Because the easy ones obviously feels good to like check them off, but it's not sort of enabling our growth fundamentally, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely.
How would you describe how you're sort of parsing out your time into different areas of interest and passion today?
I was thinking a lot about community and engagement and social practice right before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, we had those series of wildfires here in California. And I finally had to face my younger ecology club days of like, oh, this is not cool. And it's vital, right? I need to come back full circle and embrace thinking about sustainability and climate change and everything that's happening in the world. So I started innocently enough, just looking to see what was happening in the architecture and interior design industry. And AIA, American Institute of Architects, had literally just released a statement that said climate change needs urgent and sustained action by architects. We need to come together. We need to solve this problem. And I checked my association's websites and absolutely nothing on, they didn't talk about sustainability at all in any way or climate change. And there's a couple of associations and I checked them all. And so I wrote a call to action that was published in the Fast Company called It's Past Time for Interior Designers to Make Climate Commitments. And that started me on a bit of an activist track. I didn't realize I had that in me, but I started a climate action committee here in my hometown. I try to support legislation and representatives that were doing the right thing and created petitions, just kind of trying to really move the needle and realized that this was the space that I wanted to be in. Was I really wanted to look at the bigger, more systemic problems in the world and how designers could help address those issues. And that's where I've been. During the pandemic, my firm also created something called the Eco Playbook, designing with the future in mind. And I think that that's part of the problem with our industry is we're very much in the moment and we're not thinking about the impact that our designs and our projects create for future generations. And so I started a podcast during the pandemic, just like everyone else, called Break Some Dishes. It started in 2020 or 2021. And the idea was I felt that our interior design industry was very insular and very inward focused, which is we think about our clients, we think about kind of toxic materials, we think about health of people, human-centered design, but we don't really go beyond that. We don't think about the community. We don't think about the ecosystem, the bigger picture. And so we wanted to bring, I have a co-host, and we wanted to bring outsiders that were basically disrupting the status quo, generally through design, whether they were scientists, industrial designers, activists, artists. So we had a whole host of people business people that were trying to do things differently and trying to address systemic problems in the world, whether it was plastic pollution, ocean-bound plastic, climate, embodied carbon, things like that. And we've been I can't believe we're actually still doing the podcast. It's our 6th season, so our 6th year of podcasting. And it's taken me on quite a journey, and I've met so many incredible people. I'm sure that's why you love podcasting as well. And I realized maybe about a year or two ago, like one of the things that I've learned is my meditation teacher says, follow your charm, follow what charms you. And so I've been thinking about that a lot more. And I realized the thing I didn't like about sustainability and thinking about climate change was the technical aspects of it. And then the more I was thinking about what am I drawn to, I really want to understand why things are happening the way they are. And that really brought me to thinking about systems and systemic problems. And I really feel like the inequity in the world is one of the main factors fueling climate change. And with that, I think women, especially since the pandemic, have really suffered and struggled with climate change. Our entire season this year is about women in design, women breaking dishes in general as well. But thinking about why we need more women in leadership positions, why we need more women in sustainability and addressing climate change, and more diversity in the rooms where we design and think about solutions.
That sounds amazing. Has this season started or is it upcoming?
I think we've launched 3 or 4 episodes.
Amazing. We'll put that in the show notes as well. So other than the early work you did and the podcast, what are you doing today from a design perspective with respect to climate change and sustainability?
I am working with a magazine called Metropolis. They're an architecture and design magazine, and they're very focused on sustainability. And they do a bunch of programming and events around sustainability. So I help them create material and produce and present some of these programs. Right now I'm working on something called the Sustainability Lab that's going to be featured at a big interior design conference in Chicago in June. And this year we're going to look at materials and sustainable materials, all kinds from bio-based to regenerative to compostable, like just the whole gamut of how materials play into our ability to tackle climate change and the carbon that we're creating and the heat that's building up on our planet.
And your goal with this, I don't know if architects come to this particular conference, but your goal is to explain and sort of ignite a passion within architects and interior designers to learn more, care more, do better. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think primarily to inspire and educate around climate change is number one. And I keep trying to think of ways where sometimes I feel like we're preaching to the choir, and I'm like, how can we reach people, like almost like do a bait and switch? Like, how can we get people into the room and they think that we're talking about this, but then we actually tell them all about this, and they get excited and they get on board, because that's the thing that I feel like we need to act quickly. We need to move the needle much more quickly than we are. And I think that's the big challenge.
Okay, so that is really your primary focus. Is that fair to say right now?
Yes,
this area?
That is my primary focus. And as soon as I can break my habit of starting the easy things first, I want to get back into my art practice. Because I also have a degree in fine arts, undergraduate and graduate, and I have been playing with, my graduate degree was called New Genres. And basically, the idea is that the message drives the medium. So I was working in all kinds of media, from even video to performance to sound. And I ultimately landed in kind of this hybrid of sculpture, 2D to 3D work. And I was doing a lot of silkscreen printing. And my design practice obviously heavily is influenced my art practice. So creating patterns in two dimensions, and then somehow turning them into 3 dimensions. Thinking about architectural motifs and traditional patterns and traditional designs and their implications and meanings throughout history, and trying to change that meaning or give it a different meaning. Mostly now I work with paper mache and collage. It's my happy place when I can get my teeth into a project where I'm just making for weeks on end. That is my happy place, and I want to get there again soon.
If you could share one enduring lesson from your 30 plus years in this field, whether it's something you think that architects and designers should carry forward, or whether lay people like myself and our listeners should carry forward in a world that's increasingly driven by technology and also, of course, concerns about climate change and sustainability, what would that be?
So many ways I could answer, so many things I could say, and so many ways I could answer that. I am thinking about this project. God, I can't remember when we did that. Maybe 2010. It was downtown San Francisco, and we were so excited and proud because we had created, it was around there was a lot of food and amenities around food. We with our client had created this program where we would bring in a local chef, we would bring in a local barista. Like, you could get Vietnamese food, you could get Korean food, you could get hot dogs. And it was right around the same time where tech firms were getting a lot of blowback for kind of turning their backs on the community. And by doing this on the 20th floor of this high-rise office building, these employees were no longer going out and shopping or buying their lunch at the local corner burger joint. We had kind of killed the business in that local block area. My lesson or my thought would be, think about the larger impact that you're making as a designer. Especially as an interior designer, we can think pretty small folk. A lot of what we're doing is within a room or within a finite interior space. It's hard to think beyond the walls, but think about the impact of the community, the environment, and the planet. Think as far out as you can. And I think we, as designers, have a lot more power than we think we do to influence and make an impact. And I would say use that power and go beyond your project.
I like at the end of every episode to ask the same questions. As we explore in my brand, Amatand, which means to tend to your soul, objects can hold a lot of meaning for us. They can take us to the past, enable us to be in the present more, and sometimes even take us into the future. Can you share with us an object from your past, whether you still have it or not, and tell us why it's meaningful to you?
Yeah, I actually have it right here, even though I know that listeners can't see it, but you can. It's a little magnetic birthday cake that my mom made for me. I've always wondered where my creative side of me came from, but my mom, I don't think she got much of a chance to really explore her creative side, but I think she was always dabbling and making cute little things, and she made me this birthday cake that says "Happy Birthday, Verdita," which is my nickname. And it's dirty. I need to figure out how to clean it. And the P and the H are missing. I want to fix it. It's made out of that, what do you call it? That clay that you can buy that doesn't need to be fired.
Clay. Yeah.
And I want to clean it and fix it. But birthdays were very special for us. We celebrated. It's funny that it's a cake because we would always celebrate with a pie. And we would get our favorite pie. My brother liked a blueberry. Ugh, I hated blueberry. But my brother would get blueberry. My sister would get pecan. And I would often get rhubarb or gooseberry. I loved sour pies. And so it was our special day. And my mom would just make sure it was our day to do whatever we wanted.
Are you still having gooseberry pie on your birthday?
No, sadly, no. I just celebrated a big birthday, and my son, actually, it was really amazing. We had a coconut cream cake from the Halekulani resort that was beyond incredible.
That sounds amazing. Well, hopefully, at least you're still making it your day. I love that tradition. And actually, that kind of leads to my next question, which is, can you share a favorite tradition? And maybe, I mean, the birthday sounds like a wonderful tradition with the pies, but I don't know if you have another tradition, either from when you were a kid or with your family or what, anything at all.
Yeah, and it has to be Thanksgiving. I grew up in a small family, and when we finally settled in Northern California, we would drive down to San Diego to visit my cousins. We'd spend 3 days with them, and it was the best 3 days of the entire year. My aunt and uncle created this absolutely traditional, fabulous meal. The setting of San Diego was exotic with the palm trees. I just loved being around family. And then as we shifted and generationally kind of took over Thanksgiving, my family would barbecue a turkey. And so kind of gathering around a barbecue and with family is just probably one of the most special things for me to do. And I think my son would agree also. He loves it as well.
And barbecued turkey is delicious, for the record, if anyone has not tried it. So you've already shared a couple of wonderful resources with us, and you can either repeat those, we'll put them in the show notes, but any books or favorite books, podcasts, anything, and it doesn't have to be, but can be related to sustainability or design or workplace or any of those things.
So we are reading for our podcast, and this season on women, we're reading a book called Invisible Women: Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. It's a kind of a Bible for any kind of product designer. It talks about how when women aren't part of our Congress or our House or our City Hall, that aren't making decisions, or even in corporate environments, or even researchers, they will often not get considered, to the detriment of all of society. So it's an interesting book, and it touches on all kinds of different topics, from in Sweden to combat uniforms to healthcare to women in politics. It's a fascinating book. It's a really amazing read. So I would highly recommend that. And then two things that I love. There's a open EDU platform called Slow Factory. They're basically an educational resource. They published a few books, and they address climate justice and inequity. And I think with the shift that I was talking about, my recent shift towards really thinking about the systemic issues and like what the causes are, I've gone to that as a resource quite often. And also with my shift a little bit more into thinking about women's issues, I love this newsletter, The Meteor. It's focused on women and girls and issues around that. But they've got a couple of podcasts. They do live panel talks all the time and things like that. And it's a media platform, basically.
Okay. So and then remind us, your podcast is called Break Some Dishes. And,
Breaking Dishes was taken. So we had to go with a little bit of a variation.
Break Some Dishes is wonderful. And remind me the other book that you recommended earlier. Do you remember?
Oh, yes. It's called Deep Work: Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. I would, instead of that book, I would recommend a book that I often quote called How to Do Nothing: Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. She's an artist. And it's a beautiful, poetic book about slowing down and focusing on what really matters.
That sounds wonderful. I love getting book recommendations. I love to read, and I know that our listeners love to get them too. So last question, what do you do for yourself? Do you have a practice, a focus, a habit, or daily routine that contributes to your well-being, your ability to focus, any of the above?
Yeah, I have two. One comes much more easily to me. I love to lift weights and bodybuild. And I'm trying to build muscle. I'm trying to go into the gym and really pump iron and get that resistance going and burn out my muscles. And I love it, and it clears my head in an instant. The harder practice is my meditation practice. I've been at it for about 1.5 years now. It's the Vedic meditation, VEDIC, Vedic meditation. And it basically is 20 minutes in the morning, and very importantly, 20 more minutes in the afternoon or evening to get that stress back out. And I do feel better when I do it, but it's so hard.
How did you find or choose that particular kind of meditation?
Yeah, my meditation teacher is in our interior design industry. She's a weaver and a textile designer. And she's now actually just, as of this year, is just retired, but she has been shifting her focus into meditation, went to India a number of times, and now has it's called Fifth Floor Meditation, if anybody's interested. But it's phenomenal, and she's a great guide. And it really is life-changing, and it really does reduce the stress.
Amazing. It's been so wonderful talking with you. Thank you so much for joining me today, Verda.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks for listening to an episode of On the Table with Ashley. Subscribing to, rating, and reviewing our show helps us to continue to make quality episodes. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. On the Table with Ashley is presented by Amatond, an elevated, everyday, luxury home and tableware brand with products designed to cultivate connection. You can learn more about Amatond at amatendre.com or on Instagram at Amatond. By subscribing to our newsletter on the Amatond website, you'll receive updates on new episodes as well as promotions relating to Amatond and Amatond's products. Send us an email at reachoutanytime@amatond.com if you have ideas for guests or series ideas you'd like to pass along. Thanks for listening.